I'm with Cheryl from Bridges for Peace. Now, Cheryl, what is Bridges for Peace?
Well, Bridges for Peace is an international organization. Actually, our mission statement says Bridges for Peace is a Jerusalem-based, Bible-believing Christian organization supporting Israel and building relationships between Christians and Jews worldwide through education and practical deeds expressing God's love and mercy. It's kind of long, but it really does express exactly who we are. We've been here in the land for over 30 years, and our goal is to build relationships between Christians and Jews through practical deeds here in the land and through education and outreach in the rest of the world.
And why was your organization founded?
Well, actually, we were founded by a gentleman from Canada who grew up in Korea, of all things. He was the son of Christian workers in Korea, and he had a vision. He was a man well ahead of his time that Jews and Christians actually needed to get to know one another, to open doors of communication that had been closed for 2,000 years. And his name was G. Douglas Young, when Dr. Young went back to Canada from Korea and then eventually to America, he became a college professor, dean of students at a couple of prestigious evangelical universities, and really began to implement that vision. He reached out to the Jewish community, brought Jewish leaders into his Christian seminary classrooms to hear a Jewish voice. He was a pioneer in Christian radio, by the way, and brought those same leaders onto Christian radio programs to really help a, a, an ever-increasing swath of Christians understand who the Jewish people really are, understand what God's heart is for this nation and those people, and really grasp that God's covenant with the Jewish people is in fact an everlasting covenant. It's still in place today, and God has a plan for our two communities coming together in these incredible days that we're living in.
That's amazing. And what projects do you actually run here at Bridges for Peace?
Well, we have an amazing amount of work that happens here in the land. Um, we have food distribution, which is one of our major projects here, and we distribute between 60 and 70 tons of food every month to needy Israelis. We have two distribution centers, one here in Jerusalem and the other in the north in Carmiel. And we reach out to nearly 30,000 people every single month through those food distribution projects. We have many other projects as well. We have a project called Feed a Child, where we provide everything really that an underprivileged child needs to be on equal footing with the other students in his classroom. That project began in Beit Shemesh, and we are now doing it in Carmiel as well. But through that project, we provide a hot lunch every day. We provide school supplies, a backpack, access to computers, summer camp, extracurricular activities, again, everything that that student needs to put him on equal footing and help to break the cycle of poverty that many of these young people have lived in for a very, very long time. We also have a home repair project where we send Christian volunteers into substandard housing. They paint, they do cabinetry, they put up handrails for the elderly, everything that's needed to provide not just a safe environment, but a more beautiful, positive environment. And many of the recipients of that program are the elderly, many of those Holocaust survivors. And we have a variety of other projects as well. But the real goal of every one of those projects is the relationship, helping Jewish people to understand that there is really a quote unquote new kind of Christian afoot these days, a Christian that really loves and stands in support of the nation and people of Israel. And on the other side of the coin, to provide a venue for Christians who are discovering this connection to Israel to actually have a way to practically express their love and support.
Do you think that the gap is narrowing between Jews and Christians with the work that you're doing? Do the other Jews begin to really understand what Christians are all about?
I believe that that is happening, yes. The work that Bridges for Peace has done, and there are other organizations like ours here in the land that have been working alongside of us, and we are making a difference. Um, I think that more and more Jewish people are coming to understand that Christians really have a sincere desire and a biblically based desire to support them, and to help in whatever way we can as the Lord is fulfilling prophecy in the land at a remarkable rate. More and more Jewish people, when we're having conversations and they find out that we're Christians, their response is very, very positive, shaking our hands, sometimes with tears, thanking us and saying we're coming to realize that evangelical Christians are the best friends that Israel has. And I also can say through our national offices around the world, there are very exciting things happening between evangelical Christians and Jewish communities worldwide. So I think all over the world, God is moving to open doors of communication and strengthen this growing relationship.
It's amazing. Now you're ministering to Jews. Do you minister to Arabs as well?
Actually, yes, we do. We have projects that support the Christian Arab community here in Israel. We are a donation-driven organization. So when people give us a donation, they tick the box that says, this is where I want my dollars to go. And we are extremely faithful in making sure that those dollars go to that project. If people look on our website or in our publications, they'll see that there is a box that says support for Arab Christians. If they tick that box, that money goes directly to that project. So we do support Arab Christians in the land every month with food and other types of assistance. However, I will say that there are other organizations that focus primarily on the support for the Arab Christian community. Bridges for Peace is primarily, our major focus is the Jewish community, again, helping to rebuild the relationship. And so the amount of support that we do get for the Arab Christian community isn't huge, but we do receive it and we do make sure that it goes directly to that community.
Now you have a food bank, and how important is the food bank for the people who are using it? And are many people here living on the breadline?
Actually, yes, poverty is a significant problem here in Israel, and many people don't realize that. They look at the news, they read publications coming out of the land. Israel is a first world nation, and they don't realize that that poverty is quite an issue here. As a matter of fact, about 25%, approximately 25% of the population lives below the poverty line, which is a significant number. Um, and of that number, about 400,000 to a half a million actually live in dire poverty. Those are the neediest of the needy. And about 850,000 or so are children that actually go to bed hungry every night. So it is a significant number. And this is a wonderful nation. It's a first world nation. It's a nation with a very strong economy. But the other side of that coin is things are very expensive here. It's an expensive place to live, particularly cities like Jerusalem. So poverty is an issue. The government, of course, works very, very hard to reach out to the needy and does everything that they can do. And we are grateful as a Christian organization to be able to fill in some of those gaps. Israel spends an awful lot of its money on defense and also on immigrant absorption. And so our organization and others like us, like I said, feel like God has called us to stand beside the nation and fill in as many of those gaps as we can, help as many living under those poverty conditions in the name of Christians worldwide.
So that is what the food bank is actually doing by helping, providing a need there.
Yes, yes. And as I said before, we feed about 25 to 30,000 people every month. And we also have um, food in storage. In Carmiel, we have both a distribution center and a storage center. And in that storage center, we actually have about 500 tons of food in storage, and we're constantly cycling it through so that we don't have spoilage, and we don't, we worry about things like expiry dates. But that food is there so that in case of emergency, whether it be war or natural disaster, anything that would interrupt Israel's ability to care for its own. We have that food there, and we work with the city of Carmiel as far as war preparedness. And that food is available then not just for the North, but the whole country to assist in times of dire need.
Now, one of your aims is to counter anti-Semitism. Is anti-Semitism growing around the world? And is it bad in here in Israel as well?
Anti-Semitism is actually growing around the world. Some of the statistics that you read might indicate that it's not, and that's because those statistics center on what we call traditional anti-Semitism, acts of violence against Jewish people, graffiti, property damage, those kinds of things. And in some nations, like America, for instance, those kinds of incidents are actually decreasing. Now, in other countries, they are on the rise as well. But what is really on the rise is what we're calling the new anti-Semitism, and that is holding Israel up as the Jew among the nations. It's not politically correct to be anti-Semitic in some of our nations. However, we know it is very politically correct to be anti-Israel. And attacks on the nation of Israel, accusations of Jewish people worldwide, connecting them to, for instance, the apartheid accusation against Israel. Those are definitely acts of anti-Semitism, and they are on the rise dramatically all over the world in attempts to delegitimize the nation.
Do you think the world understands Israel?
No, I don't think the world understands Israel. I think even the Christian world, unfortunately, doesn't understand Israel. I think one of the basic principles in understanding this nation is understanding the Bible and what God really says in that Bible about his heart toward this nation and this people, about what he means when he says he's entering into covenant with them, covenant being a relationship of inextricably linked eternal oneness. And he says the covenant with the Jewish people is an everlasting covenant. That's critical to understanding Israel. And, again, the world and many in the church don't really understand what God means when he says that. And, of course, the prophetic significance of Israel, the tremendous number of prophecies that are being fulfilled in this land, God having said millennia ago that the Jewish people would be dispersed, but that they would be brought back into the land from the north and the south and the east and the west. They would make the desert bloom. They would re-inhabit the ancient cities. Those things have never happened before until Israel was reestablished as a nation in 1948. And since then, we've seen God dramatically fulfilling those prophecies. And I think the other critical element is the very purpose for the nation of Israel, which God outlines in Genesis chapter 12 very clearly. In Genesis 12, verses 1 through 3, he gives us his purpose for the nation, and that purpose is blessing. God chose and created this nation specifically to bless through revelation of who he is to all the nations, to bless through the amazing discoveries and developments that are coming out of this nation every single day that are improving the quality of life for people all over the globe. And of course, as Christians, we also see that blessing in the form of the Jewish people and the nation of Israel being the human channel through which our Messiah, Jesus, came to us. So the purpose for Israel is blessing. And those are all critical elements in really understanding this nation, what God is doing here, and understanding the vehement attacks against the nation. Because I think it's clear that attacks against Israel and the Jewish people are, in effect, attacks against the God of Israel and the Jewish people.
So it's a spiritual battle, really.
It is definitely a spiritual battle.
Now, are you bringing tours to the land so that you can educate about things like this?
Absolutely. Our national offices around the world bring tours, some of them several times a year. And we at the international office here also sponsor some very specific kinds of educational programs here in the land. But we are dedicated to educating the Christian world about what's happening here, about God's heart toward the nation and people, about anti-Semitism and what it really is. And we believe that nothing nothing can really open your eyes to this reality like letting your feet touch down on the soil of this nation. So we believe bringing people here and giving them an experience of the land and of the people is critically important.
And you have a magazine called Dispatch from Jerusalem. What's that about?
Oh, yes, we do. Our magazine, Dispatch from Jerusalem, comes out every other month. And our goal with that magazine is to let the world know what's really happening here. There are so many wonderful things that happen in this nation virtually every day on the biblical front, the archaeological front, in science, technology, medicine, you name it. This nation is at the forefront of discovery and bringing blessing to the world. But hardly anybody ever talks about that aspect of it. So we are committed to bringing that message to the world through our publications. That is the main goal, really, of our Dispatch from Jerusalem. I spend a lot of time traveling worldwide on behalf of the organization, and I can tell you everywhere I go, one of the first things I hear from people is, your magazine is top notch in the Jewish community as well as in the Christian community. So yeah, it's a very important part of what we do.
And you've got a project with children's books coming up as well, haven't you? What's that about?
Actually, yes, we have a number of books that we have just recently released, and some of them are specifically geared for children. We have one book that's called Israel, the Land and the People, which is a great activity book, help just introducing children to all different aspects of what the Bible says about the land, what the land is like, what they would see if they visited here, that kind of thing. Then we also have a coloring book that's called Celebrate Israel. It's a holiday coloring book for virtually all ages of children. For a little bit older children, we have a book called Scribes and Scholars, which introduces them to the Hebrew language, the history of the language, how to write the language, really, really fun kinds of materials. And actually, people should watch the website, www.bridgesforpeace.com, because we have a couple more children's books coming out in the not too distant future as well. We feel that if we don't really begin to connect the younger generation with what's happening here in the land, we are really, really missing an opportunity. We also have a project called Zealous 8-2, which is our young adult program, and that reaches out to the 18 to 30-year-olds. We have two programs here in the land. We bring 18 to 30s from all over the world for a really intense, wonderful Bible study adventure tour in January and June of every year, January and June of every year. And we're finding that we are having the opportunity to impact hundreds of young people all over the globe.
And finally, you've got your international offices here in Jerusalem. Tell us a little bit about the history of this building.
Well, we are sitting in an amazing place. The building that we have our international headquarters in is actually part of the complex of the Ethiopian Church, which has a very, very long history here in the land. And we lease our building from the Ethiopian Church. And this building was actually built by the Queen of Ethiopia in the late 1800s. Her goal was to make pilgrimage to Jerusalem from time to time, and she wanted a palace to live in while she was here. So she built this building. Unfortunately, she never came. So it didn't fulfill that purpose, but it has fulfilled a number of purposes throughout the years. It was a girls' school, it was an art school, a variety of different things until we arrived here on the scene quite a number of years ago. And I think that God knew all those years ago when the Queen of Ethiopia built this building that eventually Bridges for Peace would be here, and it would be the headquarters for Christians blessing Israel, Christians from all over the globe.
And what's your prayer finally for the Jewish nation?
Oh, well, we continue to pray that God will protect. We pray as we're instructed for the peace of Jerusalem. We pray for wisdom for the leaders of the nation. We look at the situation and we see prophecy being fulfilled, and that's very exciting for Christians around the world. But one thing that they sometimes fail to realize is that prophecy being fulfilled actually involves individual human people living here on the ground. And sometimes that's not so pleasant. So we do pray for protection and for God's blessing and for God's will to be done, because we know that his plan for this nation is the perfect plan. And we want to be a part of that plan. We want to be his hands and his feet here in the land, but we want him to to continue to deal mercifully with the nation as he fulfills his plan for the redemption of all mankind.
And what's your website address again for people who'd like to know more about the ministry?
www.bridgesforpeace.com.
Okay, Cheryl, thank you very much.
Thank you, Paul. It's really been a privilege to be with you.